Good morning, folks. This is Dr. John Taylor Kent here. It's October 11th, a little after 5 in the morning. I had a really bizarre dream last night. You know, when Nancy Pelosi shows up in your dreams, it's not a good night. It was a nightmare. She was giving the country a tour of a bizarre facility. And the facility was kind of a combination of twisted stuff. So if you don't want to hear about twisted stuff, go somewhere else because we're going to get into this. Nancy Pelosi was giving us a tour, a personal tour of a factory that was set up to slaughter and sexualize humans. And in this factory, the government had been discovered doing this, evidently, and they decided they were going to do a public relations campaign, and they were going to have Fancy Nancy giving us a personal tour. And they had this facility that was like a giant trough and a giant industrial kind of a slaughterhouse. And it looked like it was brand spanking new, nice and shiny, and she was putting on the best sales pitch she could as to justify why this large government program had been begun and undertaken, and how reasonable and how sensible it was. So basically, these bodies, because these people didn't look alive, were conveyed down this stupid ass weird pipeline, stainless steel, bright, shiny stuff. And these are naked bodies, and they were necrophized. Is that a word? Necrophized? They were sexualized. They had sex acts performed on them, anally and vaginally, by a weird transgendered individual, a woman with a damn penis on her. I mean, it was twisted and it was bizarre. So now that I've given you that, I'm going to put it in a context that I hope you'll understand. You'll forgive me for giving you this horrible, ugly ideation, because it is nasty. And just think, Nancy Pelosi doing a PR campaign trying to justify this horrible industrial slaughter, perverted facility. What does it mean to me? Well, I had watched a Men Going Their Own Way video a little earlier, and it was about a famous porn star who regrets her life and is trying to. She's getting more attention by talking about how she regrets all of these movies, scenes, whatever the hell you want to call it. I don't really consider it acting, to be honest with you, because, well, anyway, she's a beautiful woman, and she made some choices, and she's stuck with those choices. And what I want to point out to you and put this in a larger context, and I'm going to be introducing to you a book that is really one of the most important research books ever written in the world. And I'm also going to be discussing Adolf and what a savior he was. And I know a lot of you out there are going to get, oh my God, he can't be saying that. I mean, don't tell me Dr. Kent is a Nazi or a neo-Nazi. No, please don't go around saying that shit about me. Please don't. But I think we need to give the man a fair shake, and we need to understand him in historical context. And I know nobody's thought of this before, so this is going to be kind of an unusual video, and I don't know how I'm going to title it. There was a book published in 1934. It was finalized in 1932. A social psychologist's lifetime work. It's on the internet. You can get the PDF form. It's way over 500 pages long. It's got a lot of stuff in it. And I first heard about this from the fellow who does Black Pigeon Speaks. And when he mentioned the details of this book, and the basic conclusions of the book and how things had not been, it had not been disproved. The hypotheses and conclusions of this book had not been disproved. And I got to thinking about it because, I like to think about the examples, the exceptions to those rules. I like to think about the possibilities. I like to brainstorm. I like to chunk it up and go because I learned things from doing that sort of exercise. And I realized that the conclusions of this book were not quite accurate. And I put it in terms of history. And historically, it fell right where it needed to be so that he didn't realize the outcome. And I also talked to an older friend of mine, a decade older than I am, about this. And he corrected me by informing me as to what the old German officers that had been retired in this country, that were at a convention in Ohio, what they told him, because he wanted to know why the Germans lost the war. And so we're going to cover that all in this video right now today. And I wish I could give this thing a decent title, but it certainly is no answer to Jordan Peterson. It's off his radar completely. Geez, when I put his name in the title, I get a lot of views. In 1932, a social psychologist, what was his name? Good Lord. He wrote a book, on Sex and Culture, I believe is the proper title for it. And his name was, I'll think of it in a little bit. It's kind of an unusual name. And I hate to interrupt this video to go searching down his name. But it was regarded by Aldous Huxley as one of the most important books ever written. And it was because of the scientific conclusion. So I need you ladies to hear me that this is the conclusions of the book. Don't go lambasting me. However, I find his conclusions to be pretty serious stuff. Basically, after studying all of the civilizations in history, everything he had access to, and doing years of research, he had come to conclusions. Unwin was his name. Unwin. Unwin. And you can get that book on the internet. It took the fellow who does Black Pigeon Speaks and Navy Hato. It took him a year to respond to my query and for me to get this reference. And because he mentioned it, I want to know what it was. Then I did a little research and I found a free PDF archived on the internet. I suggest you get it while you can. It's huge. Don't expect me to send it to you because it's massive. Unwin, published in 1934 on Sex and Culture. I think it was either Sex and Culture or On Sex and Culture. I'm not sure that the preposition on is a formal part of the title. And there basically were two conclusions after studying all of these civilizations, the rise and demise. And he came to the conclusion, and I know as I'm about to say this that it sounds pretty preposterous and doesn't sound reasonable, but you need to hear me. Basically, that any society, when women's sexuality became unbridled in any culture, in any civilization, two things occurred. The first was that civilization ceased to exist. In other words, it signaled the demise of that civilization, and they disappeared from the face of the earth. Okay, that's a pretty serious conclusion. And the second thing is that once women's sexuality had become unbridled, those were his terms, archaic as they may be, I think I want to use his language. He used it for a reason. And this was the man's lifetime work. So he finished it in 1932, and he waited 2 years to publish because he wanted to be absolutely sure about his conclusions. So The other conclusion was once when female sexuality had become unbridled, that genie could not be put back in the bottle. In other words, it was irreversible. Now, that was published in 1934. What Unwin didn't realize is a gentleman was going to come along 2 years later and put the genie back in the bottle. Yes, boys and girls, Adolf Hitler succeeded in reversing that one aspect that Unwin had concluded from all of his years of study. He had put the genie back in the bottle. But that's not to say that his culture, civilization, didn't disappear from the face of the earth. It certainly got obliterated. It got targeted pretty hard. But what I didn't realize until this week was that the burnings in Berlin began with the books of a fellow named Hirschfeld. Don't remember his full name. I just saw this for a little while, and it's not a repeated fact, so I don't remember it worth a damn. And the meme came up on Facebook. It was sent to me in a personal message, and I looked at it, and I thought, well, geez, I don't know if this is true or not. It basically said that the book burnings in Berlin, they began with the transgendered library, the transgendered studies of a particular physician in Germany. He passed away in the 30s, as I recall it. But what I'm coming down to is that the people in Berlin, the population woke up. Yeah, talk about getting woke. Only it's not woke as you guys are applying it. The people in Germany woke up and decided they were going to get rid of this filth among them. They were going to deal with it. And the first thing they burned was the transgendered books. You need to understand this. So I went and I looked up this meme and I looked up this fellow, and I found out it was absolutely true. So I always thought the book burnings in Germany, they burned Bibles or something, you know. I mean, I thought, well, they must have burned great books. They must have destroyed a vast knowledge base and deprived the rest of us of it. No, they went after the transgendered stuff, the filth, the stuff that was twisting them up and destroying their society and their culture. And they knew it. They knew it deep down in their souls that this was bad for them, so they burned those books first. Now let's go to the Bible. There is a book burning in the Bible. It's in the New Testament. And they talk about the value of these books, like 50,000 drachmas or whatever it is. It sounds like millions of dollars worth of books. You got to remember there was no printing press back then. So books were done by hand, individually. It was intense labor, and a man needed to be paid for his labor, so a book was expensive. Well, that occurred, I believe, in the book of Acts, somewhere shortly after the crucifixion. Or should I emphasize this? Shortly after the resurrection. I need to follow my own example. That's probably more important to think of it as a resurrection rather than a crucifixion, because the resurrection is, I hope it's more important. We have a book burning in the Bible in old times. And what was it they burned? They burned all the occult books. They burned all the stuff that went against what was written in the Old Testament. All of the books, probably regarding astrology, probably regarding alchemy, probably regarding spells and alchemy. They went after the occult sort of books. They went after the secret stuff. And you can bet they went after the stuff that had the perversions in it that were published and probably revered back then, because that's what we have today. We've got stuff that's out there and revered. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put the porn star's name out there, and I'm going to put that in the title because I know I'm going to get a lot of views. But her name is Lana Rhoades. Road, as in rode hard, put away wet. R-H-O, R-H-O-A-D-E-S. I believe it's spelled like the old city from a long time ago, which is a much better way to think of it. And I'm sure that young woman wants to be remembered uh, in a cultural sense rather than for her pornography. Yes, she's young, she's lovely, she's very beautiful, but she seems to want to be worshipped. A lot of women want to be worshipped. To you ladies out there, what kind of mistake is that? You want the attention. I understand that. You all want attention. That's all you want is attention. Okay, fine. But she certainly got it. Now she says she doesn't want it. And she starts off with saying how she was the highest paid and on top of her game and in charge of her life. And she was strong and powerful and whatever it was. And she's applauded by the interviewer there for this. And then immediately it came down to she'd only had one sex partner before she entered the porn industry. Yeah, okay, right. I don't know, and I don't care. And that she was exploited. Okay, she's exploited. Well, I kind of look at her as a predator and look at her as exploiting all the men that watch that shit. Okay, so Lana Rhoades has had the audacity to decide to force herself out there as a normal life. So she's being very public with how she regrets porn. Yet she had a series of boyfriends, and she wasn't sure who was the father of her own child. She had that much activity going on. And for some reason, she went after basketball players. They got the big pockets, you know. And so she decided to predate upon them. And she decided she was going to, well, apparently she made a decision. I think she made a decision to get pregnant by one of them because then she could tap into his account all the time and she wouldn't have to go do porn anymore. She could just raise her baby and have this very wealthy, accomplished, talented basketball player sending her a check every month for money for nothing? For what? For her child support and for her support. Anyway, the point I'm getting at is our society is pretty sick at this time. I don't think the people here in the United States are sick of this wokeness and this other bullshit enough to rise up and burn books yet. However, I also know that we're going through a period. We're at the end of an Earth age during which the magnetic field of the planet weakens. And when that happens, it affects our brains. And we are not able to be as civilized. We're not as able to inhibit ourselves. We're not as able to control ourselves. We lose self-control. And you can bet that when people get religion, that they're going to go after these people that they perceive as destroying their nation, their culture, which is what is going on. And that's what was going on in Berlin. You go look up the Weimar Republic. They had a lot going on. The bankers were ruling the roost back then, too. They had this incredible hyperinflation, which we're about to undergo. And they had this weird stuff going on. Oh, there were 57 different names. The German language is rather unique. They don't have synonyms. I don't think they might have homonyms, but they certainly don't have synonyms. And when it comes to poetry, it's kind of hard to write poetry when you don't have dual, meanings. Well, two words for the same meaning and all that. They have very explicit language. Anyway, what I'm getting at is that we're going down that same road that Germany went down. We're going down that same path. Pornography, prostitution has become mainstream. It used to be in our culture that a woman could work as a woman on the side or be kept as a woman on the side, a sugar baby. Even the culture for sugar babies in our country, that old culture, that's collapsed as well. Everything is getting getting collapsed. She's wounded. We're going to go to the vet today. She hit a culvert real hard. She was running in the desert and didn't see it and banged her chin and her leg up on it. It's kind of open. She's eating better, though. Yeah. Oh, yes. She's a pretty girl. Yeah, look at that. Okay. All right, no teeth. No teeth. Off. 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 She's insisting I'm going to pet her. Sit. Yeah, I'll pet you. You stay right there. No, no, no. So we're at the crossroads here. Now, I haven't finished talking about Adolf Hitler yet. And I know we're not allowed to talk about him on this and speak highly of him for certain on this platform. But this is my First Amendment free speech rights in conveying this information to you, my loyal audience, for the purposes of your growth and edification, and so you can get the word out about this stuff and you can understand it. Now, I didn't realize that the book burning, that the Nazis, and I hate using that word, especially the way I just use it. I'd like to cover that in this video if there's time. But the fact is that the National Socialists didn't call themselves Nazis, and so I don't like using that word. It's a worse word than the N-word, which I don't tend to use. I haven't used it much since I was a child, and we sang all those damn nursery rhymes without even realizing that we were offending anybody or could be. That was a long time ago. Anyway, what I'm getting at is we're in the same position that Germany was before Hitler came to power in many ways. And I did not realize that what had happened was they had taken his society, the culture, down to the dregs so badly that this was the reflexive reaction of the people. They loved the Fuhrer. They loved Adolf Hitler, and I'm wondering, why did they love him? It's because basically he turned things around and he saved their society. And I know, my God, you can't be saying that about this most evil man in all history. Well, John F. Kennedy didn't think he was so evil, and other people didn't think so. They got the truth. You and I didn't get the truth. We still don't have the truth about the guy. But apparently, Adolf Hitler turned things around in Germany. And he created 6 million jobs. Remember that. 6 million jobs. That's one of the reasons why they had to claim 6 million Jews were killed, because, well, to go against his 6 million jobs that he had created. He also changed society, the structure of it, so that the family was edified. For instance, and they also saved their economy by monetizing labor. So if a man was willing to work, he was going to get paid and paid well. So all of those rewards and motivations were there, which we don't have in our society here today anymore. But one of the other points was that prostitution had become so normalized over there, and it has over here. And as a matter of fact, it's so normalized that 1 out of every 3 American women during some point in her life will prostitute herself. I know you're not going to want to believe that, and you don't like hearing that. I was pretty shocked when I heard it, but I've heard enough other people repeating it that I think it's the doggone truth. 1 out of every 3 American women. So what's so abnormal about it? It was that high. They had 57 different names. Heinz 57, so it's easy to remember that. 57 different names for prostitution in Berlin during the Weimar Republic. And you could call up and you could order up from your drugstore, from your pharmacy store, whatever you wanted. And they used code over the phones when they ordered these children or mothers with their daughters. And they would ask them, well, how long have you been having this problem? Oh, about 13 or 14 years. Well, whatever it was, they had a way of talking around things and gussying it up and making it look prim and proper and not as bad as it was. So they had all kinds of stuff going on over there before Hitler took power. Hitler took power, it goes away. And they monetize labor. So a man's able to work. And I don't know all of the details, but one of the big ones was that if a couple got married, there were certain provisions made. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of them was that you had to stay home with your wife for a year. I would imagine he actually pulled from some of the old principles of the Bible, of the old Israelite principles. What we do know is that upon the birth of your first child, that lovely mortgage that you had was reduced by 25%. So here's Adolf Hitler putting together this wonderful social order in which men are able to work, so women are supported, and women are able to have a family. And they're able to earn their house by having children. Talk about a stimulus program, an economic stimulus program. Wonder what Lana Rhoades would say about that. Upon birth of child number 2, 50% of the mortgage was forgiven. So they're still making payments, but half of the mortgage has gone away. Now, I don't know how they did that. I mean, mathematically, financially, I don't know how they did the bookkeeping and collections and all that stuff. Upon the birth of the 3rd child, 3/4 of the mortgage was given to the couple. So, I mean, you had motivation to have children. You had motivation to have a family and keep it together. And of course, with the birth of child number 4, the house was free. Now, that's a decent socialization program. Talk about motivation. Talk about healthy. And the women adored him. No wonder. They gave them their husbands. They gave them working husbands, men who could go off, work, feel good about themselves, bring home an honest wage. And the woman contributed as well. And they both had children. Women were very fulfilled. Even Lana Rhoades had to have a baby, even out of wedlock. So she's very, well, I don't know how fulfilled she feels at this point. She's got her crusade, and she's definitely marching in it. But anyhow, Adolf Hitler put the genie back in the bottle. However, his country's still come apart. And that's where we come to my old friend who's a decade older than I am. He's still around. He's read the Bible more than most anybody else I know. He's familiar with more versions of the Bible. So when I need some help and I need advice, I go to him, and he helps me pick out which ones to buy. He likes this new Bible, by the way, the proper name version of the King James Bible. So what I want you to do if you want to support my channel is buy the Bible. Follow the link in the description. You'll get the cheapest price available for this Bible. At least that's what the publisher assures me of. The price will end in 77 cents. And that way he differentiates my sales from his general sales on his webpage or sales otherwise. The price is approximately $40. You're going to get a quality Bible that the other guy's going to want about $150 for. Well, $115 easily. But you're going to get a leatherette bound copy of the Bible, printed in Belarus. So when these Bibles are gone, we're never going to get these cheap prices again. It's going to be much higher. But we want to get them out there. The publisher's highly motivated to get them out there. And I am as well. The proper name version of the King James Bible is an immense improvement on the Bible. I mean, it's a big, big deal. Yeah, you know what I wanted to say. I'm a man of coarse words, I know. So, I want you to buy the Bible. And if you don't want to read it, give it to somebody else. But I do want you to read it. I want you to read Genesis in particular and become familiar with it. Because you have to understand Genesis to understand me. That's where this thing all starts. And in case you're wondering, the Bible is a book written by Israelites. About the Israelites. It is not a world history. It doesn't cover the Chinamen and all that other stuff. Yeah, the others are mentioned only as they have interactions with the Israelites. So it was written by Israelites, about Israelites, for Israelites. Now, at this point, we're all pretty mixed up. So a lot more of you have got Israelite DNA in you than you think. And so the purpose of my show is to awaken my brothers and sisters in Israel, to turn this nation into a bunch of Bible readers, real warriors. Why? Because if you don't know the truth, if you don't understand the truth that's in the Bible, there's no way you can fight this war. You certainly won't win it. And there's even questions whether or not we're going to win it. Now, I told my buddy about Unwin's research, Dr. Unwin, and it's one of the top 10 books written in history. And it came to the conclusions that once female sexuality became unbridled in a civilization, and they loosened up on female sexuality, they never could put it back in the bottle. They never could squelch it again. They never could reduce it again. And that culture was doomed to extinction. So that's where America is today. And the enemy that's inside of us is riding us quite well and guiding us down these roads. And in case you're wondering what they're using, if you read the Bible, you'll see there's 3 major sins. The first one being the error of Balaam. And then there's the gainsaying of Achan. There's a third one in there. But the main thing is that they've got us all toasted on the error of Balaam, which basically was a sexual sin, sexual crime. It resulted in a pandemic, resulted in a lot of deaths. And it's one of those things that they don't emphasize in the Bible. They always emphasize the license and liberty you have, which you really don't have. And they do their best to deceive you with this modern religion that they pulled from the Bible. It's not there. So you got to read the Bible for yourself. Just push your way through it. Read it as a history book. Read it as a history law book. Learn the names of the characters. Learn the plot. Study character development. Do your best to draw lessons from it and realize that that book contains the basis for Western civilization. And without that book, we have no foundation. And you won't have Western civilization if you let this stuff go on much longer. Now, I certainly don't want to see somebody rise up like I was told Adolf Hitler rose up when I was younger. And I watched those videos, those black and white films on television that we had back then. It was before color television. They sped the videos up. They made him look and sound like a madman. I finally heard a natural recording of his voice, and it was quite pleasant. Even for the German language, it had some appeal to it. It was low and resonant, and it was very melodious even. It wasn't a screeching maniac like they put out so obviously on those videos where they sped it all up. Thank you, Hollywood. Thank you so much. So I told my friend about this, and I was telling him about Unwin's work and the fact that that basically Hitler had saved his nation, saved his culture, and he corrected me. He says, "No, looks like they got him too." Well, he didn't say exactly that. I can't remember exactly the words, but he corrected me, and he pointed out that a woman took down Hitler. I didn't know that. He was hanging out. He's got the old tattoos, and he was hanging out with Germans. He's fluent in German, reads and writes. Well, he's fluent in German. He knows the old songs. He's the real deal. Kind of a skinny, wiry kind of a fellow at this point. Tough as nails, and worked as a laborer all of his life. And he went to this convention, if you will, in Ohio. And he had been hanging out with the older German officers long enough that he could finally ask them questions, and they would talk to him. And he asked one of the retired German officers there, "What happened? How did you lose? How could you lose?" And this older gentleman took his time thinking about it and finally told him, you know, that's the question we've been asking ourselves, because we had it all planned out, all worked out. There was no way we could lose. And he said they figured out among themselves that they lost because one of their generals' wives, he was married to an Italian woman who was a communist. And she talked her husband into sabotaging the Germans when they were in Russia fighting. He was he was the quartermaster. So she talked him into sending supplies to the wrong places. So when they expected to get ammunition at a particular location on the front, he made sure to send the caliber they couldn't use. So he sabotaged all of their supplies across the front lines in Russia, thereby saving Russia. And at the end of the war, this German general and his Italian wife went to Moscow, where they were received with great honor and lived and treated as if they were royalty because they had saved Mother Russia. So, yes, a woman destroyed Adolf Hitler. And I'm going to put that in the title of this as well. Hopefully, YouTube will allow this up. I really don't like getting strikes, and they don't tell us beforehand. But I'm trying to put this in a proper context so you can understand where you are today and where we are. I think I've told you all I wanted to tell you today. Go look up Unwin's Sex and Culture. That's the conclusions, and realize that he published that 2 years before Hitler came to power. And Hitler actually turned things around and put that genie back in the bottle. They still took him down anyway. So we in the United States are very much in that position where we could have, who knows, somebody rise to power along those ways. Now, me, I'm not presidential material. I'm not suitable for president. I don't have the temperament for it. I get too pissed off. My emotions are too strong. You can get my goat too easily, if you know what I mean. So, other than that, yeah, I wanted to be president when I was a youngster, but I mean, that's about the last job I want now, because those guys don't run the country. They are the front men for the banksters. The banks run this country at this point. You know, even Nancy Pelosi's just an actress, a glorified actress out there putting on a show and doing what her masters or owners tell her to do. So I'm going to sign off and out. I think we've got quite a bit going on here. Thanks for being with me this whole time. May Yahweh bless America.